Grab a cup of tea or listen as you go, ladies. This is your hour with Dr. Zoe, your life and relationship coach. With encouragement, on-point insight, inspiring guests, health tips, and advice, Dr. Zoe helps busy women keep their mind in the game by redefining your Superwoman. You're listening to The Dr. Zoe Show.
Welcome to the Redefining Your Superwoman podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Zoe. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist with a doctorate in clinical psychology. I'm a life and relationship coach, and I'm a motivational speaker, and I can work with you virtually to help you get unstuck. My passion is helping women find their superpower because I believe that everyone has a superpower, and I love to help you find it, embrace it, and share it with the world. So you can connect with me by texting the word JOIN to 38470 or go to my website at drzoeshaw.com. The topic today is getting over fear-based thinking. And I did a show about fear a couple of episodes ago, and I honestly don't think that we can talk enough about getting fear out of our lives. This interview with Mary Shores is really good because she is an example of how you can get past bad experiences in your life and how beautiful your life can be when you are not living in fear and when you get your self-talk under control. If there's anything I can impress upon anyone, it's how important that self-talk is. And until you've really managed it and transformed it in your life, you cannot even understand the power of it. So, Superwoman win, Superwoman fail times. You guys know why I share this. I share this because it's so important for us to honor our wins. It's so important for us to recognize our fails so that we can learn from them and move on. So my Superwoman win this week is that the Tooth Fairy showed up on time and the first time for my daughter. She's 5 years old. She lost her first tooth and the Tooth Fairy did not forget her. And of course, that's a win because you might imagine from what I'm saying is that sometimes our Tooth Fairy is a little forgetful. So I have let the whole family know. And of course, now we've got older kids, but the whole family knows that we do have a forgetful tooth fairy. And sometimes if she doesn't show up, you just put your tooth under the pillow another night, and she's almost always going to show up that second night. So the Superwoman win is that our tooth fairy showed up. And the funny thing is my son, who's 16, he was telling my daughter, who's 5, he's like, oh, you put the tooth under your pillow and you're going to get like $10. And I'm like, $10? He's like, yeah, doesn't the tooth fairy give $10 now? I'm like, man, he's making life hard for me. But anyway, she didn't get $10. She got a couple dollars. So my Superwoman fail is that this week, I allowed someone to affect me in a way that I have been determined not to let that person affect me, and it did. It was a brief kind of stepping out of my determined mental health. So I stepped out of health, which I purposefully practice staying in. I do. And everybody, health is something you have to maintain. You have to purposefully practice staying in it. And I do. And the good news is that I recognized it immediately. I changed my thought pattern and I moved on. And so should you. You have to recognize that people in your life who suck from you rather than give to you, you have to put them in a box. I talk to my clients about a warm hedge that you put around yourself, not a cold wall, a warm hedge to protect yourself from people who could be toxic in your life. And so if you choose to keep them in your life, then you have to figure out those healthy boundaries. And you have to remember that you and only you are in control of how you feel. You determine the story you create for your life. No one else does. And so there's my fail, which is also a win because it just reinforced for me things that I need to continue to practice in my life. And now let's talk about getting that fear-based thinking out of your life with my guest, Mary Shores. So Mary, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I have had a chance to check out your book, and I'm so thrilled to talk about this topic.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much, Dr. Zoe, for having me on. I'm really excited to share with you today.
Yeah, so just so my listeners know, you are an Amazon best-selling author. You're the author of Conscious Communication, which is the book I just referenced. And you had what you have described as a rough childhood, and you also had a devastating death of your first child. You've built a highly successful business and you had an unexpected, messy divorce, which happens to a lot of us. And you also raise an autistic son. And I'm saying you are clearly a very resilient person. And this is why I wanted to talk to you today, because I know that your story and your life is one of empowerment for women. And I want to share this with my audience. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
So, we're going to talk about getting rid of fear-based thinking. Can you share just a little bit about your history and how you've gotten to a point where you've overcome a lot of this?
I sure can. And I want to also preface it by saying that you can, and I certainly am an example of this, you can still create tremendous amount of successes in your life, even if you have a foundation of fear-based thinking, because fear-based thinking, your success might look more survival-based, but I'll talk about that and talk about the differences of it. So I grew up in not the best of circumstances because I have an unstable mother. So I was sent to live with relatives at a relatively young age. Like, I don't know the exact age I was at, but I'm going to say like 4. And I lived with relatives for a couple of years, was returned to my mother, but then abandoned again around age 16. So when I was 16, I was out on my own with literally no resources and no guidance. And this is where I think that is the beginning of my resilience journey, because I still managed to graduate high school, but I was living out on my own and started to go to some college, but got pregnant early on when I was only 19. And my daughter was born with a severe brain injury. So what this looked like is that she was blind, she was deaf, she was unable to suck a bottle or to swallow. So she had a gastronomy tube inserted into her tummy. So she was in a complete vegetative state, and she lived, especially her first weeks of life, were on life support, but eventually she came off of that. And it was very much like living in and out of the children's hospital and not having anything. I mean, so my partner and I literally slept on the emergency room floor. And this was our life for the duration of the time that she was alive. After she passed away, I began to rebuild. And when I was 24, I started my first business, which, I was very grateful to have that kind of opportunity for. But, this is a really great way to show success, even if you are stuck with fear-based thinking. Because my fear was, I didn't start this business from a place of great empowerment. I started this business because I really was worried that as my peers were graduating college, as my peers were getting great jobs and they were starting their like adult life, that I was not going to live up to the kind of success that I really felt like I had the intelligence for. So that's the reason I decided to start my own business. And I'm really grateful now that I did. I just want to be upfront and say it didn't come from this like empowering superwoman. It came from this like disempowered, knowing that no one was going to pay me what I was worth. But it still takes courage.
Absolutely.
It takes courage. It takes planning. It takes something that probably back at that time, I didn't have the ability to give myself credit for.
I think that's true. And I'm so glad that you said that you started this business still very much in fear and really trying to prove something to yourself, or fearful that you wouldn't be able to do something, because it's really being preached a lot that, you have to be mentally strong and you have to be in this place to be able to have a successful business. And the reality is, over the course of a lifetime, absolutely you do. And you need to be working on that consistently. But you don't have to start from a place of perfection. You just have to start. And I love that you shared that story.
And it's true. And even when you start, accept that you have failures along the way. I just was going through a situation over the weekend with my son who got accepted into a very prestigious college engineering program. And already he's failing his first class. And I was talking to a girlfriend of mine who's an educator, and she goes, Mary, she said, I got D's my first semester at college. And she goes, that's not unusual at all. And it really made me, it kind of took me back into hyperspace of my own life and how many failures that I've had. But really, like, the failure isn't necessarily the important thing or the important moment. It's the bounce back. It's
Right.
in that moment of the bounce back. It's in that moment of discovery, because you learn so many things just in that brief moment. Number one, you learn how much you want something.
Right.
Because if you fail and you're willing to walk away, then you probably didn't want it that much.
So true.
You think to yourself, what's it going to take? What's it going to take, Mary? What's it going to take, Keegan? What's it going to take to pick yourself up and move yourself in the direction you want to go? And see what happens when you ask yourself that question, what's it going to take? And we've all had these moments. See, you're stimulating these strategic centers of your brain that are going to start formulating a plan. Now, it might not come to you instantly. You might be in the shower a week later. You might have like a deep sleep and wake up and feel this just sort of renewed sense of something, whatever that is. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
But it's that what's it going to take moment. And then it takes taking those first steps.
Right. And you're talking about focusing, because I have that experience so often when I decide to focus on something. Like you said, what's it going to take? And you don't have the answer. You're asking yourself that question, but you're determined to move on that path. And what happens is I'll be in the shower or I'll be at the gym, and all of a sudden the answer comes when I wasn't focusing on it, but I had already put that into motion in my brain. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, your greatest failures are so important, because it just reveals so much to you.
Speaking of your greatest failures, as usual, I often do this. I forgot to start with your Superwoman win and your Superwoman fail. So can you share those with us today?
Yeah. Okay. So let's go with a win first. So I think that one of my Superwoman wins is getting my book deal with Hay House, because for 10 years, I really wanted to write a book. Like, it was just this burning desire. And it was so strong that I would go around and exhaust my friends, because I would constantly say, I want to write a book, but I'm not a writer. And the thing is that words are like a mirror to your subconscious mind.
Yes.
And these words, like when you hear me say the words, I want to write a book, it's like you can see that written on my soul. Like, I came into this life with this purpose of writing this book, but I have a big problem when the next words out of my mouth are, but I'm not a writer, because those words are also revealing that something in my subconscious does not really believe that I am capable of writing a book. And let me tell you something, as long as that is my belief, I was never going to write a book. So I feel like my Superwoman win is in the moment when I invested in myself, went to a writer's workshop in New York, and learned that I absolutely was capable of writing a book. Because at the end of that class, at the end of the week, I wrote a short story about my daughter who passed away in 1993. About my son on the autism spectrum, and what it's like, trying to raise a child with special needs where there's just no rule book. And I paralleled this with my entrepreneurial roller coaster up and down journey. And when I read that, like, no one laughed at me or told me I was a writer. And see, they stood in line to like give me hugs, and they were crying. And so that showed me, my subconscious then got the evidence it needed to change that belief, which then changed my thoughts, which then changed the way I felt about it, which then changed my actions. And within 7 months, I had a book deal, because I was completely in alignment with the direction that I wanted to go.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. And that's all about getting rid of that fear-based thinking, because your fear was that you weren't a writer. The reality is that you were. You just didn't believe it.
Yeah. And then I would say that for my biggest failure, and there have been so many, I really think that my biggest failures are when I repeat the same mistakes and the same lessons that I've already learned. And a lot of times this has to do with relationships with other people, whether it's with a male or whether it's with a female. But some of my biggest failures are, not believing in myself enough, or sort of feeling like I have to contort myself in twisted ways to conform to other people's expectations. That's not a very specific fail. And believe me, I have specific fails, but that's the one that came to my mind. So I'm sharing it.
No, thank you for sharing that. And, relationships are so hard, and being successful in business has nothing to do with being successful in personal relationships. And I think that especially as women, we often, like you talked about that contorting, we often do that because there's a part of us that feels like the real me isn't lovable. And so we try to create this person that we think the other person will love. And when the other person loves us, the thing that we do that hurts ourselves is that we have this internal knowing that the other person doesn't really love who we are because we haven't shown that person to the person that we're in relationship with. And so we still have this sense of not feeling loved, even though we've created this dynamic, if that makes sense. And that's why it's so important to not contort and to be yourself and allow the people who are supposed to love you and know that the people who don't, it wasn't supposed to happen. So thank you for sharing that fail. So many women have that one.
Yeah, well said, my friend.
Yeah. And especially when you talk about repeating the lessons, that's the deal, is they're going to continue to come to us until we learn from them. So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So you were talking about how you had this saying that you said to yourself is, I am not a writer. And that just brought me back to some of the things that you said in your book. And you have in your book a list of do not say words. And my guess is that you had to work on overcoming those words in order to be able to move forward in your life, to get those words out of your life. Can you talk about your do not say list?
Yeah. So what's interesting about that is where it was born from. So in my career and in my business, I ended up writing a business communication strategy that I started teaching workshops on. And then that eventually transformed into an entire personal development program. So while the word chart that you saw is really great, and if you follow along that little section in the book that you were reading, you can see how to incorporate that into your business. But the deeper meaning and the whole way that it works as a personal development strategy is to understand that like all of our creation comes from within, and that everything that we create needs to come from a place of empowerment. The problem is that a lot of our communication through ourselves, like that interpersonal self-talk, that tyrant that lives in our head that is constantly telling us to feel guilty, that is constantly telling us how terrible we are or how ugly we are, or even worse.
Yeah.
Or that whole unworthiness thing, that if we can kind of, or not even kind of, but if we can begin to recognize, like, just like I explained about the writing, because it's not just about saying I can't write a book, but how often do people say, I want to start a business, but I don't have the money or the education or the support, or, I am just not worthy of having a partner. It's like understanding these things that we're training our subconscious through. So every time we are acting like a tyrant to ourselves or saying things to ourselves that we would never say to a friend, what we're doing is we're programming and reinforcing a very negative neural network that's deep within our subconscious. And so it's kind of the beginning framework of starting to pivot those neural networks so that we can plant a new seed in your subconscious mind, and you can begin to water that seed more than you water the old ones. And eventually those old ones will break down and the new ones will strengthen. And that's really what you want to happen. And those words, the reason for their significance is because of the way that they trigger our fight or flight system.
I love that picture that you just planted, that you can water some and the others will kind of die away. And I talk about that a lot, especially when it comes to affirmations. You have to say more positive than negative. And as your positive grows, the negative will deplete. But there is like a tipping point. And so you have to stick in it long enough to get to that tipping point, especially when you have this long history of fear-based thinking, this long history of negative talk.
Yeah, let's go into that just a little bit, because I was talking about creating from a place of empowerment. So, one of the things is that understanding that everything you create from a place of empowerment, and empowerment's a really big buzzword right now. So I want to
Right.
take a moment just to talk about, what do I mean by empowerment? Well, I mean that you understand inside, outside, backwards and forwards what it is you want, and you have some idea of either the first steps to take to get there, or you've got the whole picture, but you are ready to fire. It's like you're at that starting line, you're at that gate, and you can just feel your body propelling yourself forward. That is the feeling that I'm talking about with empowerment. Now, understand this. We are manifesting, we are creating everything in our life in every moment, because every word we say, every thing we do, every action we take, every choice we make in the thinnest sliced moments of life is either creating a deeper connection to what we want, or it's driving a disconnection.
Right.
And so everything that you create from that place of empowerment that I described is going to show up stronger, faster, better. It's going to be longer lasting. And most importantly, it's going to have a greater impact, which is the most important thing. Now, the flip side of that is this fear-based thinking, that when we are in a place of despair, when we are not feeling good, I've asked my friends lately, if you could just tell me on a scale of 1 to 20, how well do you feel right now in this moment? From 1 to 20, not 1 to 10, but whatever number we're working with is the golden information. Someone asked me this about a month ago, and I said a 7. And I don't think that's very high on a scale of 1 to 20.
Right.
That is an indication that I'm in the fear-based thinking. I'm in a disempowered state. And everything you create from a disempowered state is going to be weak. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be chaotic. It's going to be complex. And it's going to feel like, instead of you feeling like you're at that starting line waiting for the gun to go off, it feels the opposite. It feels like you're stuck. It feels like you're walking through cement and you just can't take another step.
Right.
And here's the thing, like right now, if you're answering that question and you are also below a 10, listen, this is not the end of the world. All it means is that now is not the time to create anything. And that what you really need to focus on is some self-care. And what I mean by self-care is doesn't need to be huge or expensive or detailed at all. It just means taking space for yourself. Whether that is getting a good night's sleep, whether it's skipping phone calls, whether it's not going out to that dinner, but closing your circle in and taking space for yourself. And then what you'll notice is when you do that, it will only be a day or two before you start climbing that scale. And once you get up to the 11, 12, 13, 14, that's when you begin to take action. So one of the ways to really simplify this is just check in with yourself. How do I feel? And then don't feel like you have to take action until you're in that empowered state of being.
I love that. That reminds me of something that I prescribe to a lot of my clients, and that's a season of no. I know Shonda Rhimes talks about the season of yes, but sometimes when you're in that place, one of the best ways to care for yourself is to say no to everything, or almost everything that isn't, a dire has to be, because by doing that, you give yourself the space. And when you make that no an automatic, then you don't have to think about it. You don't have to accidentally say yes and then go back and wish you hadn't said it. And it gives you a little bit more space in your mind, your brain, your life to focus a little bit in on yourself.
It's so funny because when you're talking about that whole, year of yes thing, or say yes to everything. So one of my assistants and I, all last year, we said we are going to make every decision based on how much stress it's going to cause or relieve. And think about that. What if you made all your decisions?
I love that.
based on the stress factor? There's just all these little simple things that you can do to start to transform your life, because, we're in this time where we're always looking for instant transformation, when the truth is that transformation happens in literally the smallest pivots over time.
That is so true. Another way to think about this is what you talked about in your book of cleanse or clog. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I love cleanse or clog. So Cleanse or Clog is essentially chapter 5 of the book, and it's
Uh-huh.
called To Cleanse or Clog, That is the Question. And really by this time in the book, we're understanding some basic principles about personal development and, really in a good place to start taking action or start to make some changes. And so it starts with this understanding that infinite possibilities are really available to all of us. But you know what I think, Dr. Zoe, is that a lot of us confuse infinite possibilities with highest potential. And they're really not the same thing, because infinite possibilities means anything at all on a spectrum of good to bad, terrible to miserable, to euphoric, to, blissed out. Anything can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas highest potential really means that we're always performing at capacity to our greatest, the greatest ability that we have.
Right. Uh-huh.
We're always being the best version of ourselves. So it's really very different. But what I realized is, if I can just start making choices that are always in the same direction of what I want, and I can do that systematically like 80% of the time in my life, how much quicker I will be able to be in control of the things that I want. And so I called that Cleanse or Clog. Like I said before, everything you say, everything you do, every word that comes out of your mouth in the thinnest sliced moments of life is either creating a connection or driving a disconnection. And so, like, let's just say, for an example, that I want to lose 20 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
I could learn some sort of complicated diet like keto or paleo or Weight Watcher points or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have time. I don't have time for that. So I could also just use my intuition and look at a piece of food and ask myself, if I put this piece of food in my body, will it cleanse my body or will it clog it? So if I look at an apple, then intuitively, I know that the nutrients in that apple are going to cleanse me, versus if I look at a slice of pizza, I know that there's stuff in the pizza that is going to clog me.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And that if 80% of the time I choose cleansing, connected choices, in about 45 days, I'm going to see like major shifts in my life. And so this isn't just about food. Think about this, like, the same thing. Everything you say, every word you speak, every choice you make in your partnerships is either creating a deeper connection or driving a disconnection. It's either everything you say to your partner is either cleansing that relationship or clogging it. And so if you just slow down, and before you send that text message or before you make that phone call and you say cleanse or clog, you will have an answer pop in your head instantly. Or how are you cleansing or clogging your career choices, or your finances, or your spiritual development? You can literally use cleanse or clog in every area of your life as like an instant check-in to know, is this getting me closer to what I want or moving me farther away?
That is so perfect. And I love that. And that's why I wrote down cleanse or clog. It's so simple and it's so fast. And I also love the fact that you said 45 days, because a lot of times we'll start something, we'll get 2 weeks, 3 weeks in, and we're like, it doesn't work. But just like you said, over time, it's small changes over time that really transforms your life. So I love that you talk about that. So as we're talking, I'm just thinking of that woman out there who may be in a place where she really just feels frozen with fear, where she can look back on her life and realize that maybe almost all of her choices were based on fear and not even based on what she really wanted and really wants for her life, but more about what she doesn't. Can you talk to her for a minute? What would be the first tips that you would give her to just start to take those baby steps forward?
So, well, the first word that came to mind when you said that is trauma.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you why, because we have experienced traumas in our life, and trauma is not about necessarily the thing that happened to you. Trauma is about how it manifests itself in its present day. And so if you are frozen and everything is like, from the point of view of worry or fear, understand that it's probably something from your distant past that is manifesting itself in the present day.
Right.
And like, I'm a firm believer that our bodies are like libraries, and they are storing everything that has ever happened to us since birth, or perhaps even earlier than birth. And the more traumas that we go through, and I certainly have been through my share, so I'm understanding, like, I'm really speaking from my heart to say the way that traumas affect you. In chapter 2 of my book, I've got a process in there about rewriting your story. And the thing is that if you are in that place, and I have been in that place, and I'm actually thinking of a time that I went through a violent attack. And when I came home after like being released from the hospital, I had a speech to give within a week, and I could barely speak. And I was just devastated, and I was in a terrible, terrible place. Well, I started with a gratitude practice because, you know, every spiritual practice, every religion that I know, they all have a foundation of gratitude. And the thing is that a gratitude practice will really help your neural pathways, because what it does is it starts to create neural pathways in your brain that are becoming stronger in the area of looking at your world or perceiving your world as a place that is safe, as a place that has good things happen to it. And so it can be as simple as being grateful for the fact that you have a toothbrush to brush your teeth with, because believe me, not all people do.
True.
And so like acknowledging that there is trauma and maybe grieving it if you need to grieve it, and starting with gratitude and then moving into learning how to tell a new story about yourself, because the story we tell ourselves about ourselves over time, that becomes our identity.
Yes.
When we're working with these types of identities, we can get into like that victim mindset. And I'm not saying that's bad or judging anyone for it, because I've been there. But what I know is that truly the most beautiful part of your story is in the moment that you moved on. It goes right back to the beginning of this show when we were talking about the bounce back factor.
Yes.
What's the most fascinating thing about you is how you picked yourself up off that floor and how you moved on. And I guarantee you've done it. You haven't gotten this far in life without having done it at least once. And the way you start your show with the small wins is perfect, because neurological research is showing that when you reminisce on a win, you're actually reinforcing the strategic centers of the brain that were the steps you took to create the win in the first place.
That's so perfect and so true. And even as I've started this practice, because I share a win and a fail every single week, and it reinforces for me, wow, I really do have these amazing wins every week. And yeah, the fails are there too, but I learn from them, and I always talk about what I learned from them. And so, yeah, that's just so true. And as you talk about the trauma, you're right. Our bodies and our brains house trauma, much of which we're not conscious of. And Tony Robbins talked about post-traumatic stress disorder. He talks about post-traumatic strength and how you can kind of flip it. And the idea that it's just like you said, it's not the event that happened to you. It's the story you tell yourself about it. And so two people can have the exact same event happen and come away from it in a very different way. So I want people who are thinking about some of their traumas or thinking about a lot of the fear that they have, and some people who may even feel like they have PTSD, to change that word around to post-traumatic strength, because the strength is there. You have it in you. You just have to find it. And like I say, harness it and share it with the world, but it's there.
That was so well said. I love that. I hadn't heard Tony say that before, post-traumatic strength.
Yes.
And it is so true. Even if you're not there yet, that's why I'm like, reminisce on the time that you were. When is the time you thought you were going to fail the test, but you aced it?
Yep.
When did you win the race? When did you make the team when you didn't think you were going to? Like somewhere in your history, you have won at something, and just really focus on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I love that. I love the cleansing clog. I love the focusing. So tell us about your daily desires diary. Where did that come about, and how can people get a hold of that?
It's really interesting because it's almost as if the entire show today has been talking about what's in the Daily Desires Diary. So
Wow.
that's never happened before. It's like so perfect.
So
Well,
cool.
the Daily Desires Diary is a download that I've just designed for like shows like you because I love the idea of having a daily practice. And one of my secrets to success is that I've always had a daily practice of one sort or another. And so the Daily Desires Diary is just a simple journal page that I hope all of your audience will download it. It's free. And what you get is a space to write down 3 things every day that you're grateful for. And the reason that we want to do the gratitudes is because from a neurological standpoint, I've already mentioned that, but it strengthened these certain neural patterns in your subconscious that are going to help you to perceive the world a little bit differently and a little bit better and a little bit more vibrant of a space. The next one is, and this is so perfect for you, Dr. Zoe, you're going to write down 3 moments from the day that you're proud of. Now, they don't have to be big, right? Like they can be little things. So whether it's a small win or a big win, you're actually going to just every single day. And by the way, this journal page will not take you more than 5 minutes. Just 3 little things you're proud of. Maybe you got up on time. Maybe you didn't flip that guy off in traffic, like whatever it is. Maybe you got a promotion today. Like maybe you did something really cool. It doesn't matter. But research shows that the more you reflect on your wins, the better you are priming that area of your brain to create more wins in your life. And then we're going to follow this up with 3 things we desire. So in order to connect you a little bit to your future, jumpstart that manifestation process, just 3 things every day that you desire. And you know what? There are no rules here. It can be the same 3 things every day, or you can come up with 3 new things every day. It doesn't matter. It's just really helping you align what you want with a daily practice. And I assure you that if you give this daily practice 45 days, then you'll start to see what I call the synchronicities. Like the phone call that comes out of nowhere that just gives you exactly the opportunity that you needed. And along with that Daily Desires Diary page, you also get a free chapter of my book. So it gives you the perfect opportunity to check out the book.
Yay, that's awesome. So I am going to take up the challenge. I am going to start the Daily Desires Diary today, and I'm going to do it for 45 days at least. And I'll be checking in with my listeners too. Hopefully some of you guys will take up the challenge as well and share with me how starting this practice is influencing your life. I'm excited to hear that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for sharing that with my listeners. You guys can check it out. It'll be in the show notes. And you can click on that link, I assume, and connect to it.
Yay.
Yay. Yeah, I'm so excited. So thank you so much, Mary. Your life is just such a wonderful example of overcoming and strength. And I'm excited to finish your book. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with my people.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'd love to tell your audience how to get in touch with me.
Please do.
Okay. Well, I have a website, maryshores.com. That's SHORES. Mm-hmm. And then I always just ask, if the show resonated with you, please check out the book, Conscious Communications, on Amazon. I always say if you just read the description and a handful of reviews, you'll know right away if the book is for you or not. And you can also connect with me in my Facebook group called Fearless Ambition, or find me on any social media. I'd love to be connected.
Awesome. And we will put all of those links in the show notes as well. So if you're driving, go back to the site, click on it, and you'll be able to connect with Mary. Thank you so much for coming today.
My pleasure.
I don't know about you, but I so enjoyed that interview with Mary Shores. I felt myself wanting to say amen a number of times when she was talking because she was just speaking truth. And so I hope that you guys got a lot of the same nuggets that I did. 2 of my takeaways, and I wrote this down when she was talking, is that failure isn't the problem. Failure isn't the issue. It's the bounce back. So I want you guys to focus on what's my bounce back and how do I bounce back? That matters so much more than failure. And if you look at all the stories, think about all the people that inspire you, that amaze you, that you see as strong people. I guarantee you that every single one of them has a story that starts in failure, that starts in fear, that starts in defeat, and they've overcome it. The other thing that I wrote down is that the most beautiful part of your story is when you've moved on. I'm going to be putting that up as memes on my Instagram and probably Facebook page because they're just so good. So it's time for a health tip. And remember, I have a health tip segment because our minds and our bodies are intimately connected. You cannot have health in one without health in the other. And it's so important not to compare. So my health tip today, it's for any of you women who may be struggling with fertility and miscarriage. This is kind of a new thing out there. So I just wanted to share it with you that fertility and miscarriages could be due to a mutation in the MTHFR gene. I have no idea what that is, but new research has linked this gene to not only depression, but also the ability to get pregnant and sustain a pregnancy. So if this is you or someone you know, I recommend that you have genetic testing to determine if you have this mutation. And if you do, you're likely unable to process folic acid effectively. So your doctor can prescribe pharmaceutical-grade folic acid, such as Deplin, and you can have the genetic test through your doctor, or you can do it through resources like 23andMe. One of the doctors who was talking about this said that she identified this mutation and she prescribed Deplin, and since then she's had 6 sustained pregnancies with her patients. So check it out. And I will find that link and share that as well. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Dr. Zoe Show. New shows go up on Tuesdays. Subscribe so you don't miss a show. If you're interested in coaching or therapy, or you just want to get a little more help, go to my website at drzoeshaw.com or any of my social medias at the handle Dr. Zoe Shaw. Join my free newsletter by texting the word join to 38470, and I look forward to speaking with you wonderful ladies on social media after the show. Have a super week.
You've been listening to The Dr. Zoe Show, redefining your Superwoman, with your host, Dr. Zoe Shaw. Don't forget to sign up for her monthly newsletters to get encouragement, tips, and skills for keeping your mind in the Superwoman game. Connect with her now at www.drzoeshaw.com. Tell your friends and subscribe to her podcast on iTunes. Join us next time for another edition of The Dr. Zoe Show.